Hey everybody, it's Armin. We're going to do another 2.5 swap build here. I actually have two of them lined up here. You'll see I got one right here and one right there. I've done the liberty of going ahead and taking off all the BS stuff from the junkyard off of it, so we won't need to waste any time on any of that stuff. I do have a new setup today though, so you'll notice that my camera is over here. I bought a new toolbox from Harbor Freight. Got one of these US General units with the hutch. It's awesome. So now I can have all of this fantastic lighting, and you guys can see clearly what I'm doing. And then over here is still my my Cornwell toolbox, because I'm not getting rid of that guy, with the beautiful logo on it, of course. So this is going to be one of our just standard builds. It's going to be this is for a gentleman who just sent us this car from New Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Ledford. We are going to be doing your standard build that we always do, which is a 2.5, cams, and valve springs. Now, right now we're on a pretty big holdup getting fluid dampers and Esslinger cams, so we'll see if we end up installing the Esslinger cams. The BCs are going to be my backup if the ETAs are too long. So we're just going to go ahead and dive on into this. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So I'm going to go over a couple of key points throughout this video. It's not going to be a full walkthrough, I don't think. It might be. Okay, so you just zapped off the crank pulley. If you don't have one of those impacts that can just knock a crank pulley off like that, then you'll need to get the crank removal / installation tool. Since we are doing a fluid damper on this, I don't have this out, but this is the tool that grabs onto those crank pulleys and it's able to pull them off. Your other alternative is throw in 2 flywheel bolts in the back. Especially if you have it on a stand, throw 2 flywheel bolts in the back, jam a pry bar in there, and then you can break it free. It should be something between like 250 and 300 foot-pounds though, so it will take some effort. That's why I say if you have a big impact, this is the job for it. Now as far as the front goes, I don't care about what the timing is right now because it doesn't matter. We're going to be untiming everything as it is to replace out the cams, so timing's out the window. We're also going to rotate the crank several times throughout this process. So on the front we have a 10 here, 4 13s. The 10 won't be reused because that's where your OEM idler pulley goes, and then we have 8s the whole way around and then 2 8s in the middle. There's one that's a little bit longer than the others. It has a little shoulder. That one goes right here. Don't mix that one up. So I'm going to put all these to the side. We'll clean those up later. I'm going to go ahead and get to removing the valve cover. You'll notice that I threw the crank pulley away. We are not reusing the crank pulley. I threw away the crank sensor. We are not reusing the crank sensor. All that stuff must come from your other engine, your 2-liter. So the valve cover is also going to get pitched. Let's see if I roll this to the side here, you can see, unless you're doing some sort of oil cooler setup, you can just leave this perch here. Unless you have one of those factory oil coolers, then you may want to transfer that over for simplicity's sake. What I usually do is delete them for extra simplicity's sake. But we're just going to leave that guy here. I will change the filter, and we will need to change this sensor for the switch that's on the NC. I don't recall if I'm doing a rotary tronics gauge on this one, so I'll come back to that if we have to put that in. The thermostat, if yours comes with a thermostat, pitch it. The block breather we don't use, we put a new one on, so we're going to pitch that. On the back of the head there was an EGR and a water outlet. None of that stuff gets used. That's all it needs to come from the NC. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and get this valve cover off. We're going to take care of the block breather. I'll go ahead and install the thermostat. So on top here we have a head temp sensor. Ford uses a lot of head temp sensors in their builds, or in their engines. So this guy up here, we don't need. It goes into a blind hole, so we don't even need to cover it up after we remove it. It is a 19. If you don't have a goofy sensor socket like I do, then you can just do like I used to do, whereas I crack the head of it off with a hammer so I can get the plastic connector off and then get to the actual 19 to remove it. But being that I do have goofy sensor socket, I'm going to use that. This is what a sensor socket looks like. So I put it in, hook it on there. I'm just going to zap this guy out. That's it. Head temp sensor. Again, don't need it. Don't need to plug the hole. If you look down in there, you'll notice the hole goes nowhere. So there's no need to plug it. So now I'm going to remove spark plugs. The spark plugs we will not reuse. We use new spark plugs. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, we do keep our water pump pulley from the 2.5 because this one has little holes in it to make it lighter weight, whereas the 2-liter one is actually solid. So we're going to keep that. All right. So it looks like I've got all the stuff on the top end done, the front end done. Let's go ahead and pry off the front and expose our timing components. We're going to stick our pry tool right here. Give it a pry, and this will pull right off. Okay, I'm going to set that to the side, clean and modify that later. So now we have our timing components. So over here we have our tensioner, the exhaust gear. Notice the exhaust gear looks very different from the intake gear. The intake gear is the VVT gear. And down here we have the oil pump and the oil pump tensioner. And this crank gear is actually serrated, which means we will not need diamond washers for this assembly. If you have a flat front, you will notice that there's a little washer floating around on here, and those are one-time use. There's one in front and one behind the gear itself. All right, so all these are 8s. I'm going to go ahead and just remove all these 8s, and then we'll remove the 21s for the gears. And then we'll think about removing that oil pan too. Now, if you did buy your engine like I did, you know, junkyard, then you'll want to make sure that you drain the oil, and you'll probably find out that you're going to make a mess when you try to turn it upside down. I already did that off camera because I didn't want to just make a mess and, you know, all that on camera. Save some time. So I already turned both of these engines upside down to dump all the coolant out of them. It's all going to come out of the thermostat housing after you remove it, and it's going to come out of the back of the head. And then, of course, oil will come out of everywhere it possibly can. And even though these engines are supposed to be drained of oil, when you get them, they're still going to continue to drain and collect into the pan. So this one had something like half a quart. That one had something like half a quart also. As far as coolant goes, they both had probably half a gallon because it all just gets held inside the block. So don't let that surprise you when it dumps out. Let's get to disassembly. So a couple of notes there. I pulled off the guide over here, and then I threw it in the little box here, and it broke. I haven't seen that before. Good news, I have extras, so we'll just use one of those. Also, I removed the tensioner, but I don't remove this little bolt right here because this is where the spring for the tensioner holds up against. We're not going to worry about that. It doesn't help me to remove it for any reason. So now we're going to roll this chain off. So I'm going to pull the gear forward a bit. I'm going to lift up over here just a touch, pull it forwards, and then we should be able to just roll this off. So another quick note of detail. This is the front of a serrated gear. You'll see it has all the little cuts in it, and it also has it on the back. Now, the front of the gear has a little protruded boss segment. The back of the gear is just flat. So whenever you go to put this on, just remember that the protruding segment has to come forwards, okay? We'll spend some time cleaning this up later. I'm going to put this to the side. We're going to go ahead and get this oil pan off. So this time I'm going to go ahead and flip it upside down, make my life easier. Nice and gentle. Oh, and even though I've emptied this, more comes out. This is why we have our catch pan under here. Okay, so got it upside down. Let me go ahead and remove this oil pan. They're all 10s. We will not be reusing this oil pan. You do need to use the one from your 2-liter. So the bolts for the 2.5-liter oil pan are nearly identical to the ones that come off your 2-liter. They are interchangeable. So they're slightly different looking, but they work exactly the same. So we'll end up keeping those because I have a couple of core pans that I keep on hand so we can just swap them out smoothly whenever customers bring their cars in. All right. Now we do the inspection. We look inside of the oil pan to see how this engine looked. And frankly, this engine looks phenomenal. I don't see any signs of negligence on this. This looks great. Super clean. No browning, no darkening, definitely no blackening, no sludge, no particulate. So this engine is a great candidate. Next, oh, this is interesting. I don't know if I've seen this before. This is the balance shaft assembly we'll be getting rid of. This one looks like it's made out of aluminum. Usually when I pull these, they're made out of cast iron. They're really heavy. Let's see if it's magnetic. Cool, so it is aluminum. So normally these things weigh, I think this component weighs 20 pounds on the cast iron ones. So this one probably weighs half of that. So first we got to get our pickup tube out of the way. We will want to keep these bolts because we use them on the new pickup tube, but we're not using that pickup tube. We cannot. It's intended for the other oil pan, not this one. All right, so we're going to grab our impact with a 14. I'm going to get these guys off of here. Sorry, that's a 13. Now we'll grab our impact with a 14. Okay, and I don't keep any of this stuff. It's not transferable. I can't use it. So bolts straight in. And the assembly, just lift it straight out. And that will also go straight to the bin. Okay. So once again, good looking engine. The engine is currently a little away from top dead center. If it were at TDC, we would have our rod ends right here in the middle, and currently they're a little off to the side. So this is fine. We are not trying to do, we're not trying to be at TDC right now, especially since I'm going to remove the cams and we're going to end up having to do some work up top. Okay, well, since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and install our balance shaft delete. So we get all of our balance shaft deletes from Massive Speed Systems. So we got our little bolt in here. Okay, so bolt, washer, the purple thingy, and then the actual plug. This is going to go in place of where the balance shaft system was getting its oil feed from. If you don't install this, you won't have oil pressure. So there are 4 bolts here that we just removed, and then over here, this is on close to the filter, we have another hole. There's a second hole, so it's going to go bolt here and then plug here. And we're going to put a little bit of red Loctite on here as well. The Massive Speed kits do come with it included, a little packet of red Loctite to make sure you use some. Obviously I just keep the stuff on deck as it is. Alright, sorry about that, my Loctite was being a pain in the ass. So now we're going to try to drop this down in here very carefully, line it up, and I have failed. Well, that's a first. It dropped to the back of the piston. So now we're going to grab that guy out of there. Here we go. Let's attempt that again. Alright, it's in there. It's in position at least. What I like to do is get out my 1/2-inch extension and just tap down on the head of the little silvery piece, the plug, so that way it seats first and you'll hear it. You'll hear it get seated. Let's see, I'm going to grab my appropriate sized Allen. I believe it's an 8. Yes, it's an 8. So we're going to start our bolt and we're going to tap down on the head of that. Cool. Let's grab my 1/2-inch extension. Let's tap that in. Notice the sound changed. So it's definitely bottomed out. We're going to go and zap that guy in. Cool. Balance shafts deleted. So we're at a good opportunity to go ahead and replace the rear main seal. We have the engine upside down. We have reasonable access. Let's turn this thing around so you can see what I'm doing. So this isn't a promo or anything, but you should go to Harbor Freight and probably pick up a set of these Icon wrenches. These things are phenomenal. They come in a full set, so I've got all of these. These are awesome. I think it's like 220 bucks. Wait for your next sale, go pick up a set. These are awesome, seriously. So what I use these for is getting to the rear main seal, even though I have minimal access. It has an offset head, so I'm able to get in here and just get all these taken care of. So we're going to take off all the pins here. There's no RTV behind the rear main seal, so we don't have to re-RTV or clean up or anything like that. We're just going to take it off of there, and then we'll put the new one in. Okay, it's time for the rear main seal. so I have the rear main here. Since we use the Felpro ones, it comes with an installer tool. The thing with the installer tool is that it has this flange on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and take this guy off of here. Okay, what I like to do is, hey look, we got plenty of oil right here. We're going to go ahead and oil this guy up. All right. Cool. So we have our tool on there now. This gives us just enough room to line this guy up on here. So we want to make sure it's seated, and then we give it a little push, and it will line right up. And we can take the tool out. And the tool and tightness. And we can put bolts back in. Now, an important detail is that on these rear mains, you can't see if they fold or not. So what I like to do is, after I get these things back off of the stand, I'll take a little plastic panel pry tool, like the ones you use to remove interior panels, the non-marring type, and I'll push in on this little felt lip around here to make sure that the rear main didn't fold outward. Or if you're a caveman, you can just rip it out. I've done that a couple of times. Well, my non-marring pry tool is nowhere to be found at the moment, so I'm just going to use this little guy. So, like I was saying, you just push in right here. You see how that tucks in? That means the rear main is fine. So we'll do that the whole way around to make sure that the rear main is installed correctly and not folded. I have had folding happen, I think twice ever, whether it was on an NC clutch job or on a 2.5 build. So it is worth at least just checking. Now, since I'm in this position, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and clean off this whole surface, and then we'll install our pickup tube. We are not going to install the oil pan yet, because when doing valve springs, if you drop something, or anything, if you drop anything, then it ends up in the pan, and then you'll wish you hadn't put the oil pan on. Ask me how I know. All right, we're going to go ahead and remove these camshaft gear bolts. So 24, or you can go ahead and get out your big adjustable, and then a 21 impact on the front end. So that's the end of using our impact, our big impact for today. So we're going to go and remove these guys. We will keep the gears, of course. We will not keep the bolts. The bolts are one-time use. Now, some of these you'll take them off and they'll have a friction washer behind them. This one doesn't. Not all of them do, but we will reassemble with friction washers. Now, the reason for all this is because what we've found is that over the years, Mazda and Ford both made changes. They moved from using no friction washers on the crank to using friction washers to using a serrated gear to avoid having to use friction washers. Up here, we found on some of the cars they don't have friction washers and they have torque to yield bolts. And then we found on some other models that they have torque to yield bolts, or they don't have torque to yield bolts and then they use friction washers. So in the interest of the intended use of these, which is, hey, you guys are going to rev the crap out of them, which is not what the Ford Fusion was meant to do, we go ahead and we do both. We are going to put torque to yield bolts and we're going to put friction washers. So this has been the winning combination to keep your engine in time. So it's important that we clean this really well because oil's going to come out of it and oil's going to be our enemy because oil is the enemy of friction and we want friction here. So I'm just going to get this just a quick wipe down. We'll clean this out more thoroughly later. I just wanted to get some of it. And then we're not going to use these cams at all. But I'm going to go ahead and take this time to go ahead and clean the front end up, just like I cleaned up the bottom. And then we'll take the cams out. So at this stage, I've already pulled all the cam caps. You saw I moved the cams aside. I have my organizer here. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove all the buckets in the order they are. We're going to keep them in that order. It doesn't entirely matter if you do that, but I find it can help. So with all buckets removed and all the stuff taken apart at this stage, we're going to go ahead and go straight into doing valve springs. So I'm going to unbag all the little valve springs I got here. We have 16 Mazda Speed valve springs. We're going to reuse the OEM retainers. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these unpackaged real quick. Okay, so as you saw, I have a whole bunch of extra retainers and keepers. So I went ahead and got all those together. I like to do that ahead of time. It just helps me move things a lot quicker. So at this point, we're going to grab our Company 23 tool. These are available on my website along with everything else in the video. I'm going to install that guy here. It uses 2 regular cam cap bolts, which obviously I have extras of. You're going to need a leak down testing tool. So with spark plugs out, we're going to go ahead and put this guy in here. We're going to go in cylinder 1 first. I'm going to move this in a lot closer so you can see what I'm doing. Let's go ahead and set up my impacts. Company 23 tool uses a 5mm, so we're going to put a 5 on my smaller impact, and we're going to put a 10 on my... Do you have my other impact?
Correct.
I need that back with a 10 on it.
Right up.
And then we're going to get an air line over here with an adapter. Thank you.
Sir.
My deep 10. Okay. Go ahead and zap that guy down. Doesn't need to be tight, just needs to be snugged. Okay. And then we have our cage for the Company 23 tool. So I'm gonna move this off to the side here. Let's get the engine real close in frame here so you can see what I'm doing. All right, I'm gonna need my air adapter. So what we're about to do is we're about to force a bunch of air into cylinder 1. And what that's going to do is it's going to force BDC, so it's going to cram that crankshaft to the BDC real quick, and you'll see this thing jump around. There you go. If you hear a little bit of air hissing, it's not the end of the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our little cage piece. We're going to back this out and stick this in here. I'm going to slowly push this in, make sure it grabs the back, make sure the window is where we can get to it. So there we go, that should be visible. And I'm going to push in until the keepers are exposed. Get your little magnet out. Oh, hold on. Product placement? Nope, I don't have one. The Company 23 tools come with a little magnet, but mine has disappeared. So we're just going to get those keepers out of there. Keepers are out. We're going to back this all the way up. I'm going to put these aside into my collection. And we're going to push this down and over. Get it out. And there you go. That's out. Again, I'm going to hold on to that. So we're going to take one of our new assemblies. Okay, what I do is I put a finger in the middle of this. I'm going to drop this into here. What the finger is doing is trying to keep those keepers in because the stem's going to try to push them out. Now this part, you better know your tools, otherwise you're going to lose a finger. So I'm going to push this in, and I'm pushing down on those keepers, and once I feel they start to drop into place, then I'm going to go ahead and remove my finger, and done. So there's one. I'm going to go ahead and knock the other 16 out and fast forward. All right, as you saw, nice and easy using the turn 14, the company 23 tool. So all the valve springs are installed. Now that all the valve springs are installed, what I can actually do is flip this thing over and install an oil pan. And that's because anything that I would have dropped it by now. So there's nothing else I can accidentally drop down in there. So time for flipping it back over. Okay, so first we're going to need to obviously wipe it down. We will need to install our pickup tube. Move this to the side. So we're going to grab our brand new OEM Mazda pickup tube. Brand new OEM Mazda pickup tube gasket. Put those guys together. So it looks like I have a pan that has already been at least, oh, nope, can't use that one. It's got a hole in it. All right, so I have a core oil pan here. I'm gonna go ahead and spend the next 15 minutes cleaning it up so we can install it. All right, I took some good time, cleaned up this oil pan. Look at that, nice and spotless. And then the pan, like brand new. I can't say the same for the outside. The outside is a lot harder because it is that open pore stuff, so that's going to stay dirty probably permanently. But the inside, hey, look, nice and clean. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the insert, and then we'll go ahead and seal this guy up. All right, I flipped it back over. The oil pan's gonna dry for a bit. I'll tighten it later on today. Replaced out the oil filter just now. Replaced out the Ford Fusion sensor for the NC Miata switch. I have a couple of extras of those, so I just go ahead and put that on there. Note I didn't make earlier, the knock sensor does carry over. It's the same on the Fusion as it is on the Miata, so we just leave those. In most cases, they're a hell of a lot newer than what's on your NC. You know, if you're buying a post-2015 motor, which all these are that we buy, then it definitely is a newer sensor than what you got on your NC. So we just keep those. Okay, so I'm going to take care of cleaning up the intake ports, the exhaust ports, cutting down the last 3 studs on the exhaust side, cleaning off the top end. I'll install the buckets, and then I will be on hold until my cams arrive. Okay, so I mentioned in other videos, I keep 2.5 injectors in plentiful stock just because not everyone has us install the actual white stripe injectors. Some of you guys have had us put in bigger injectors, you know, turbo cars. So then we have extra sets of white stripe injectors. So I've got, you know, dozens of these. And what I do is I go ahead and I vet them ahead of time. We run them in the cleaner, we make sure that they all flow, so that we don't have any problems on startup. Got a couple extra rails for the similar reason. We installed radium rails in a couple of cars. So I got extra rails, I've got extra injectors. So these are known good injectors that we've already tested. We're gonna go ahead and stick these guys in here. You saw me clean the ports out. I'm just gonna throw 2 bolts in there. Let me see if I have some. Looks like I'm gonna have to go dig some up. All right, I'm gonna go grab those. Now the reason that we're going to cut these last couple of studs, these few studs, is because these 3 are incredibly close to the firewall. Now if you have the time and you want to put the effort in, switching over the NC studs is a better idea. They are shorter, but these Fusion ones, as long as you cut down the last 3 of them by a good, let's say, ½ inch-ish, maybe 5/8 inch, then you'll save yourself in the future when you have to remove or install header or turbo. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my cutoff wheel, got my iPro, I've threaded a nut on, got my little sander disc. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut it, then I'm gonna sand the head to smooth it out, and we'll back the nut off, and that'll verify that the threads are still straight. So it looks like we've come to a stopping point until I have my cams on hand. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess take this time to go ahead and clean up the timing components, get those nice and clean, so that when it is time, we can go ahead and throw those on. And I'll also take the time to clean the front cover as well. And we'll do the modification of the front cover on camera. All right, we're here with all of our timing components laid out. Hold on. There, it's even better. On camera. There we go. Camera's on object. Okay, so first I want to go over, you guys probably already know how to clean stuff. We've got our brake clean here. We want to get all the oil off that we can from at least these 3 items. I'm going to give a quick wipe down to the rest of the stuff. Tensioner is the main thing I want to go over. So what we're going to need is we're going to need some small, either a pick or a small pry tool. We'll need a pin, like a grenade pin, as I call it. I've got one in here. There it is, my grenade pin. And then we'll need either a vise or a quick grip. Well, I have a quick grip on deck, so this one's goofy. So the other one, you just sort of compress it, and then there's a little ratchet. Okay, when we're compressing this, you need to pay attention that there's a little clip thingy here. We don't want to bottom it out, so we're going to stop right there. This is where this comes in. I hate this part. So you just got to move this guy up. Okay, and then we're going to squeeze down a little bit more. Move it up a little more. And we just keep on repeating this process until we have the nose of this little shoulder right here, in line with the pin spot. And then we'll put our grenade pin there. Okay, so I'm just going to move this guy up. Almost there. Real close. Okay, now that we got it there, and it's important that this goes all the way to the back. Not necessarily through, but it only holds at the front and the rear, so we're going to stop it right there. We're going to release it, release the quick grip, and now that's loaded and ready to be installed when it's time to put the timing chain under tension. All right, and obviously when you're ready to tension, you just pull the pin. So I'm going to run through and take care of the rest of cleaning up here. Well, that brings us to a stopping point. Like I said, we're going to wait on our cams to come in. So when the cams come in, we can resume. I'm taking care of cleaning up this front cover here. Got this whole side nice and shiny. Sprayed it down with brake clean. I cleaned out the holes. Oh, it looks like I missed cleaning out the front main seal hole. And then I cleaned off the front side too. So this is one of the front covers that we will need to do some more extensive cutting work on. So normally we just have to cut this section right here to clearance for the belt. Problem is the belt runs right here. And on this cover, as you see, it has a boss that sticks out for a pulley. Some of them don't have that, some of them do. But it has to be ground absolutely flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my, my grinder, and I'm going to have to cut it flat. And then, let's see. Well, we'll go ahead and make the, I'll go ahead and show you how I make my relief cut on the front cover here, and then we'll test that after, you know, we get it back into the car, which is usually, I usually get it pretty damn close, so shouldn't need too much after that. And normally I do this cutting over in the corner where I can make a mess, but it's kind of dark in here today, so I figure we can do it in front of the light, so I'm going to make a mess right here. So as a reminder, since we are doing this on aluminum, we need to use aluminum bits. So if you look at this, this is an aluminum bit. The aluminum bits have very large flutes. These are called flutes. These are very large compared to steel bits, because steel bits look like this with a lot of little tiny ones, and steel bits will gall up. The aluminum will effectively start melting and fill up all those little spots, and then you won't be cutting anything. The aluminum bits are big flutes because they effectively are chipping away at the material. All right, so let's see how big of a mess I can make here. Alright, as you'll see, I've flattened it out. So I'm going to hit this now with the sanding wheel so it doesn't look as obvious that I cut it up. It'll still be some shiny aluminum though, so we can't make it disappear. If you have your idler pulley on you, what you can do is you can drop it into this spot and you can take a ruler, stick it up against the edge of that, and try to get a trajectory for what tangency you need to be cutting over here. I already know what the tangency is, I can see it. It's essentially straight in front of me. But the amount you need to cut off is if the ruler is covering up this hole, right? If you're holding the ruler up against your pulley, and it covers up this hole right here, you cut enough. Don't cut any more than that, just enough to cover the hole up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to cutting this, and then we'll check it once we get the engine actually assembled and on the car. So this seems about right for our clearance cut. You'll notice that I cut it all the way flush to the face. You need to make sure your cut goes all the way to the face because the belt travels almost right along the face. There's a tiny, tiny clearance, so if you don't cut it all the way down, then you'll end up having belt contact. All right, so that's all we're gonna do for cutting here. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up my giant mess I made. Look at me, I'm covered in aluminum. So cams should be in tomorrow, and then we'll resume on the actual engine itself. So while I've got the front cover nice and clean, hold on. So now I've got the whole front cover nice and clean, we're gonna go ahead and install the front main seal. Now, if you buy one of my kits off of the website, then you end up with a Duratec crank seal installer. I make these. I designed it and 3D printed it. Nothing crazy fancy. And then I also include a Duratec VVT seal installer. We probably won't be using that on video because that's more like after the customer's engine here is, and I transfer the valve cover. Anyway, let's use our crank seal installer. The whole idea of the crank seal installer is that it makes sure it goes to the correct depth, not too deep, as well as it makes it easy. Check it out. Perfect. Cool. Alright, so the cams have come in. It is time to go ahead and install those. Front cover, cleaned. New seal. I'm going to go sit that guy down here, out of the way. Unbag my motor. And let's go ahead and unbox these cams. Now while I'm unboxing the cams, let me remind you that the oil pan bolts still need to be tightened. I'm going to tighten those. And we didn't take the sizes down for what buckets these are, so I'm going to pop them out and write them down real quick before we actually drop the cams in. Just makes our lives a little bit easier. So then I don't have to disassemble it in order to begin the calculations and gather the new buckets. So one new BC cam. Whatever cams you buy, if you look in these, the paperwork should tell you what your desired lash values will be. So when we look at this, the intake value says it should be 0.008 and the exhaust should be 0.010. So that's 1/8 thou and 1/10 thou of an inch. OE spec is going to be 8 to 10 thou on the intake and 10 to 12 thou on the exhaust. So based on their numbers, that seems like what they go for, so we're going to try to aim for that. Depending how perfect you want to be, you may want to triple measure to make sure that you're getting the right values, because what you guys are going to end up having to do is order a bunch of buckets to make all your sizes fit. As you see, we got our cams sitting here on the table. All right, so I got all the buckets lined up here. I went and got myself a piece of paper to write this down. So what we're going to do is, we are in front of the engine. The front of the engine is towards us, so I'm going to draw this like this. The exhaust is on the left, the intake is on the right, as such. 1, 2, 3, 4 cylinders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write in the values of all of these buckets. Inside of each of them, I won't be able to show it on camera, I don't believe, but inside of each of these is a number. It's 3 digits. So this one it has an N as in November, 282. Now there's another number in here that's a T like Tony, 0905. Well, that's 4 digits, so we can't use that. So it's contextually obvious that it's the other number. So we'll be writing all of those down. So without further ado, with all these numbers written down in the order that they go, I'm going to reinstall them. We're going to apply lube to our camshafts. There is lube included in the camshaft package normally. The BC kits come with driven grease. They also come with a nifty sticker. The Esslinger ones come with, who do they come with? Lucas racing grease. But yeah, you definitely don't want to just drop the cams in dry, because man, they are dry. There's nothing on here at all. There's some sort of sticky stuff. But yeah, we're gonna make sure that they spin over nicely. Okay, let's get all these buckets installed. All right, we've literally just put the cams on top. So an important detail here is that before the cams are tightened, it's a very good idea to make sure that they're seated reasonably flat-ish. So if you need to rotate them, it's okay. Reason this is you want to get these lobes, not the lobes, the bearing positions as close to where they need to go, and you want to make sure that the front bearing, this guy right here, is slotted in. I have seen people break these cams before by not making sure this is on here, because the tolerance is very tight. The front one, you see, after the front one's in position, there is no forward-backward movement whatsoever. So if you install it just a little bit off, and let's say the cam's sticking up at the front like this, you run the risk of snapping the camshaft, and that would be bad. Now, next thing, the intake cam is indicated by the one that has holes in the front. That's because this is where the oil comes out to feed into the VVT gear and then advance and retard the timing. Before we actually bolt the cams down, I will need to put lube across them, but also it is a very important thing that we take it away from top dead center right now, since what we're going to do in the next sequence is we're going to have to spin the cams over. And if we spin the cams over, we're going to get piston to valve contact. Since the last thing we did in this motor was valve springs, it's at TDC somewhere, and we don't want to hit that. So what we can do, very simple operation, a little window right here so you can see. Let's see, and then down here we can see where our crank is. I'm just going to stick this pry tool in here, and I'm going to rotate it down. There we go. So I've rotated us away from top dead center. It doesn't need to be crazy far. I mean, after you pass about 20 degrees, it's all going to be out of interference room, or out of interference's position. So now that that's done, hey, let's go ahead and tighten up those oil pan bolts before I forget about that. Now you'll notice I did pull out this little tub of red grease. This is a red line assembly lube. I mean, obviously I have a ton of this stuff. It's a lot easier to open up those little squirt packets that come in each one of the kits. All right, so we're gonna make sure we put it on the cam lobes themselves as well as the cam bearing positions. All right, so I've started all of these bolts. It's important that you start them just to make sure that the threads engage okay. Last thing you want to do is start tightening them down and you're cross-threading, because rethreading these is going to be a tall order. So what I do on these is I'm going to start by getting this down to where there's no slack on or there's no space under the bolt head. I'm going to go back to the front one and I'm going to do the same thing. We're set to 110. I'm going to go ahead and torque all of these guys. Next, what I do is I keep around the old bolts that we took off. I mean, these aren't those exact ones, but these are used bolts. These we're going to use just for spinning the cams over. Now, since they are longer than the threads are deep, I just have a giant ass nut on there. So with all the caps down, we're going to rotate these cams over, and I want to rotate them over 10 full rotations for each cam. So I'm going to grab out my ratchet, and a 21. Now, nice and gentle on the first one, just want to make sure that there's no problems, okay? All right, no problems, so let's continue. And I'm going to finish by leaving this cam in the first cylinder pointing away. The lobes are pointing almost upward, but kind of away from the bucket, and that's for measurement purposes. Now I'll move on to the exhaust cam. Same thing, nice and slow. All right, and once again, we're going to leave that cam pointing upward. Now we're going to get to the measurement section. So we're going to get out our feeler gauges, and we're going to check and see what all these values are. I expect them to fall within, usually these things fall between something like 10 to 17 thousandths, 10 to 18 thousandths, that range. So none of these cams are actually just drop in, unfortunately. So we'll see how close we get though. Okay, so I use these feeler gauges. These are angled. They make your life easy for measuring into esconded spaces, I guess. I do have straight feeler gauges also, but those don't usually work as well in this application. Although they do go thinner. Those go down to, I think it's a 1.5 thou. I hope I don't have to measure that small. Okay. So one at a time, we're going to measure these guys. What you can do is you can either take them off of the feeler gauge thing or not. And then I just need to write the values down. So let's do it. So we've gotten our values. Let's see, the lowest we got was a 10, and the highest we got was an 18. So I'm going to take all these, I'm going to go plug them into my calculator, and we're going to see what values we need in order to replace out this bucket set. All right, I went and grabbed the laptop. Let me go ahead and put this in a larger font size. So if you need a copy of this, feel free to drop me an email, arhindrichs@gmail.com. It is available on the 2.5 Facebook group that we have, the one that's called 2.5 Swap Club. It's available under files. So let's see, does that look okay? Yeah, it looks okay. Okay, so all this stuff here, it gives you the instructions here, but I'm going to run you through it, okay? So we have everything in the order like I had it here. Valve 1, valve 2 for cylinder 1 are at the bottom, as they are here. So now we're going to go ahead and just enter these lash values that I measured. So I wrote down in thousandths. So it's going to be 0.018, 0.017, 0.016, 0.016, 0.015, 0.015, 0.017, 0.015. Okay, now we're going to go to the intake side. 0.016, 0.014, 0.013. Okay, we don't have any lash caps, so that stays blank. The original bucket ID is the bucket ID that you wrote down off of what your engine had. So we're going to put all those in order of what we found. Okay, and we put it in the intake, so 260. All right, and then over here we have our desired values in inches. So this is the value you can fill in. So as we said earlier, our desired values preferably should be, intake should be 8 thou and exhaust should be 10 thou. If you want to shoot a little under that to be on the very tight side, you can, but we're just going to do it right on 8 and 10. So what it does is it makes an approximation based on the calculation. What is the approximate bucket size? But those aren't real numbers. Like a 525 bucket, a 420 bucket, you can't get those. So what it does is it rounds to the nearest one, and then it tells you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down all of these bucket sizes. I'm going to review the buckets I have to see if I can use any of them. Then I'm going to go collect the ones that I don't off of my shelf. And then we'll proceed with swapping them out. So what I've done is I've gathered up all the buckets we do have. And it turns out we're missing some. So it looks like we're going to place an order, and this project goes back on hold. So obviously I can't assemble this when I'm missing a bunch of buckets. And some of you may say, well, just go up a size or down a size. We're out of those also. So there goes that. I'm satisfied with the lash values we've achieved. I wrote them all down here. Let's see, we had, in order of the exhaust, we have 11, 10, 12, 11, 10, 9, 10, 9. That seems pretty good to me. I'm not going to worry about that 12 because I don't have very many 462s. I just used 3 of them to get this engine together. I'm not going to worry about that 12. So on the intake side, we have 8, 9, 8, 8, 8, 9, 8, 7. Those are fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and continue on. Our next step is that we need to remember we are not at TDC. We need to be at TDC in order to perform the timing component installation. So let me get a couple of things together here. We're going to rotate our cams using our 24, and we're going to install our lock bar for the cams before we worry about putting it back at TDC on the crank itself. Okay, with that removed, we can now take the bolts off the front here, because we won't need them anymore. Now with the camshafts at TDC, we need to put the crankshaft at TDC. So I'm going to take out the little blind plug on the left side of the block there. It looks like this. We're going to put that aside for later. We're going to get out our lock pin. If you have the massive kit, it's purple, but it's it's not very long. This thing's what, 2.5, 3 inches long. It's not. There are 2 of them that come in the massive speed kit. It is not the really long one. So let's see where we are. We are nowhere close to TDC. We're past, we're right past BDC, so we're going to need to rotate it over. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a bolt in here and then rotate it over to get us close. All right, I was waiting for the compressor to turn off there. So what I'd like to point out is, it's probably not visible on camera, but right through this little window you can see that where this bottoms out, right, so it's finger tight. And then as we rotate this, you're going to hear, and that is the crankshaft hard stopping against that little piece there. Now getting this bolt off is going to back us up away from TDC a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with the impact to get it off swiftly. And then we can just line it back up with a pry tool, because now we have the counterweight exposed right here. We just push that over a little bit. There we go. So we're back at TDC. Now with being at TDC, we're ready to start with the timing. So I have all of my cleaned up components here. I'm going to look over my shoulder as best as I can allow in the angle. So remember, everything here is friction based, so we need to make sure it's all nice and clean. Once again, wipe these guys off. These are brand new cams, so they're not really oily, but good practice. Clean it all off. And as you saw earlier, I cleaned all this stuff off, so all that is nice and good to go. So we have new bolts and new washers. Let's grab those real quick. These are our new cam washers. These are our new cam bolts. Let us unpackage. Super important, do your best to not touch the face of it, because if you have any oils on your hands, then it's going to affect the friction value of these washers. So now we're going to go ahead and thread these guys on. We're not going to tighten them, we're just going to bring them down to close to snug, and then back it off a bit. So this one stops there, so I'm going to back it off just a touch so I can still have some movement. We're going to do the same with this one. These don't have a specific orientation. That is extremely important to know. These will be locked down in the position that they fall with the cam, with the whole crank and cam assembly. So I'm just going to do the same on this guy. Get it down. Got some for me, Austin?
No, I mean, kind of, but I was more curious as what was going on here. You want one of these? They're empty. Candy? Yeah.
She probably does.
This is the friction setup, yeah?
Yeah. So what we have here is, again, a serrated gear. We want to make sure it is nice and clean on the front and the back side. Make sure, oop, I got some stuff on this one. Better clean that. So we want to get all of this off of here. Make sure there's nothing on the nose here. And I'm going to go ahead and stick that guy on here. Remember, this side is the flush side, and this side is the, I guess you can call it raised side, embossed side. The embossed side goes outwards towards me.
How?
First, we're going to put on the oil pump gear. If you were paying attention earlier when I removed it, you can just roll it off. So we're just going to install this one the same way. I've got it fully engaged on the teeth on the crank. We're going to get it fully engaged on one of the teeth here, like that. And notice it's off down here, but now I'm going to roll it, and it's just going to come right on. Here we go. So now we need to stick the tensioner in there. So I got my 8, and I have, oop, I don't have the spring. Hold on. Okay, there we go. I got the spring. So now this one's a little tricky. I'm not fond of this design, but it works. So what I do is I hook the spring under here. I'm going to back out that bolt. And I'm going to try to jam this up in here. Keep it up in this position. And now we're going to stick the bolt in and have it find home. Cool. And that one just auto tensions, so it's good to go. Nice and tight. Yep. Next, we're going to stick on the chain guides so we can stick the chain on. I'm going to go ahead and do the right guide first. 2/8. Again, don't tighten anything until you have all of them in because, for instance, on this is a round hole and this is a slot to allow for a little bit of slop. So we're going to tighten that guy first and then that guy. Now that we have one guide in place, we can take our chain. I'm going to put it around the crank. I'm going to guide it around cam intake and then cam exhaust. We're going to keep it inside of the pin here. Okay, and we're going to take our tensioning arm. I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to swing it over, push it in. Now when I push it in, it won't back out. It sticks right there, which helps us. And now we can install our tensioning, the actual tensioner itself. So with the tensioner already loaded, we're going to push this guy over. This fits right into the little slot right here. I'm going to put the bolt here, put a bolt here. Now once again, we have this bolt close to snug, this bolt close to snug. Nothing's holding the crank right now. Until there is a crank bolt and a pulley on the front of this, the crank is not held at time. So the only thing holding it in time is this little pin here. And it only holds it from going past, it doesn't hold it from going back. But we're not going to mess with it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and pull the pin. Didn't move, I'm going to give it a squeeze, make sure we're good, nice and tensioned. So now these are still free to move. We could, in theory, rotate the whole assembly, but it's locked because of the cam bar in the rear. So what we have to do now is torque these guys. All right, so I've got a fancy snap-on torque wrench here. We're going to set it to 30. It's important that you don't just torque straight against the cam. We're going to push against it this way to counter ourselves, because otherwise you're hoping that the cam bar holds, and I promise you it won't. You'll break the cam. So we're just going to go to 30, which is going to seem like very little. There's 30. We'll do the same on this one. All right, and then the next step is 60 degrees. If you don't have a fancy torque wrench like this, you can just take a paint pen. What I used to do before I got this one is I marked right on the head of the bolt, right on a vertex, and then the following vertex, I made a mark here. And you can do that in both of them. So vertex here, vertex there. That's 60 degrees. The distance, the angular distance between 2 points on a hex is 60 degrees. So there you go, that's all we have to do. So I'm going to set this thing over to degrees. And we're at 60 degrees. So I'm going to stick this on here. Same procedure, I'm going to hold on. And we're going to bring it over. And there we go, 60. Now we'll repeat. $60. So at this time we're going to re-clean the front of this. We're going to go ahead and stick on the front cover. We leave the pin in the side here that's holding the crank. We're going to leave the bar in that's holding the back of the cams because we are not done timing it. Again, we have to put a crank pulley and a bolt on this. So we're going to continue on with front end reassembly. I've already cleaned my bolts. I have a set of bolts over here that are all nice and clean. I ran them on the wire wheel, so they look new. I already have that front cover I'd shown you guys that I cleaned up. So let's give it another wipe down. Really find some brake clean. And just as a reminder, when we're doing the front cover, there's one bolt that's a little bit longer, has a little shoulder, and that one goes right here. So we already do have the car here in shop. It's actually outside. Seth, say hi, Seth.
Hello.
He disassembled the car between yesterday and today, and then he took it outside to have it to pressure wash it and clean up the engine bay space since it was just dirty, just as a courtesy. So with the engine out, it's right here, as you see, we're going to go ahead and start transferring components. I still don't have a fluid damper, so this is all we're going to do for now, and the chances are the fluid damper is not going to be here for several days, so we will just install the fluid damper after the engine is in the engine bay. We'll still continue the video. It's just is going to be a little atypical just in the interest of time and moving things along. We have a lot of other stuff that we need to do to this gentleman's car, so it'd be nice to have all that stuff done and only be waiting on the fluid damper. So we're going to start by getting the whole harness off of this thing, setting it aside. We'll remove the intake manifold, we'll remove a couple of the pulleys, we'll transfer them all over. We won't be transferring over the block breather because obviously it's here. An option you can do with this next set of steps is you can go in and you can port match the aluminum intake runners that go here to the ones that come off of the 2-liter. They are a slight difference. It is in the upper region. The 2-liter stops pretty much right there with maybe less than a 1/4 inch at the top left of the port. But Esslinger Engineering did some back-to-back dyno and found that the gains were exceptionally minimal and they were only in the mid-range. So if you got the extra time, do it. Then on the NC 2s and 3s, the intake manifold has some structural, well, I'll show you. It has some structure on the backside that needs to be cut down because it will contact with this. So what I do is I put a little bit of grease on here, stick the intake manifold on, see where it marks, cut that section flat. We'll go over that as well. So yeah, we'll go ahead and start getting stuff off of this motor. So you just saw me transfer over the EGR valve. That's the thing in the back of the head that I pulled from here. If you're not reusing it, you need to put a block off there because this is a coolant passage on here. And your tuner should disable it as well. And there's no need to actually plug off this spot right here. This is the EGR tube that actually runs from the intake manifold on the side of the head. We're going to take that guy off with a 22. That is required in order to pull this intake manifold. All right, I have a couple of details I need to point out here. So I've seen several people post about having a leak on the back of the head or in the back of the head area after doing their swap, and it's probably, and most commonly, because they had a problem with the O-ring in the back here. Now the O-ring is on this hard pipe leading to the little cast piece on the rear that we just transferred over. I don't take those apart, as you see. But the thing is, alignment is having this bracket vertical. So when you put this 10 on here, make sure you put the 10 on there, that you tighten it down and make sure that the bracket is vertical. Because if you don't, then that O-ring doesn't get to seat properly. So you see we moved over that whole assembly with all the hoses and such. Now there is a detail with this one. This one has the factory oil cooler unit, which is this guy. If you have this big assembly on top, some of them are black, some of them are silver like this, then you need to disconnect the coolant hoses in order to get the manifold off. Now this specific build we're doing a catch can on, so I will not be transferring over the factory line from here, but this would transfer over to here at this point if you were. So I'm just going to leave that over here. I'm going to go to get transferred on the starter. We will end up transferring the oil cooler over, so I will be taking off this perch and transferring the filter as well. So I'm going to take a small break. I got to go get some things together. I'm going to do a little cleanup here, and then we'll resume. All right, I took a moment and I cleaned out the intake manifold as best as I could. It's really not part of my scope, but I saw there was a ton of buildup inside of these ports, as well as on the throttle body side. I mean, it was just caked up. And also the throttle body itself is super nasty. I'll show you that in a bit, but I haven't cleaned that yet. Well, either way, I took the opportunity. I cleaned out the ports as far as I can reach. I sprayed a bunch of brake clean in there, sloshed it around, poured it out. Did that a whole bunch of times. Did the same, cleaned as far as I could reach here. Also, I misspoke earlier. It's the next build that I'm doing a catch can on, not this one. So we will take the hose off of this guy and transfer it over to here. I want you to notice that the slight angle it has here is more 90-ish here, and it is less. It is more like, I don't know, a 70 here. So the 90 goes on here, and you will need to make sure that you plug it in. If you're turboing, this is your opportunity. Put a clamp on that guy, put a clamp on this guy. Although my recommendation is going to be go full VTA catch cam. You should not be running this. Okay, now I've got my intake manifold down here. Let's see. What I'm going to do is loosen up the two bolts, 2/8 that hold the EGR tube on. There, I just leave them loose, I don't remove them. So this is gonna be floppy, and that helps us because for installation purposes, that's gonna get in the way. I do have a new set of gaskets I'm gonna be using on this. We're not gonna install them just yet, but it's just a Fel-Pro kit. So I got, you know, this gasket here, and then I've got a new throttle body gasket, and that'll go there. So for now, what we'll do is we need to make our clearance cut. So if I remember correctly, it's this little spot right here that needs to be cut down. So I'm gonna go ahead, get my aluminum bit. So it's the same aluminum bit we used for clearing the front cover. We're gonna use that because it's good for plastic for the same reason, because it chips instead of grinds, if you will. So let's go ahead and set this guy up and then clean that spot off. Okay, you'll notice that I did a sequence in order to get this on here. The fitment's sometimes pretty tight. So what I do is I put all the bolts in, make sure I can line up the bottom bolt, and then draw the bottom bolt in close, draw the rest of them in close, make sure that we're sitting tight, and then tighten them all down. And then back here, I still have the EGR tube kind of loose. I started threading it. As you may have noticed, I started threading that while I was lining it up, because starting these threads is difficult as it is. So I try to start them before this is locked down. And after we tighten this down, we'll tighten down those 8s. It's also important to make sure that that tube on the backside gets plugged in when the intake goes on, otherwise your car won't start. Now the throttle body, I mentioned it was dirty, so I'm gonna have to give this guy a really good cleaning before I put it back on. Last note is this hose right here is not this, it's actually, you have to push it up a bit because the height of the engine has changed slightly. So the intake manifold's mounted a little bit higher, and so the distance on this hose, you have to push it upward to get it to fit right there. And if you don't have the oil cooler, then you don't have to worry about that. All right, so it looks like I've transferred just about all of that stuff. Cool, we're probably just in time to go ahead and tighten up the front cover, and then we'll leave the top open because we're going to be we have to wait until we have the fluid damper. So no fluid damper means the cam lock has to stay in. Another detail we got here, you'll need to identify which one of these VVT solenoids you have. You can do this early on because all you need to know is, does the connector point rearward or does it point forward? If it points forward, then you don't have to change out the connector, because this connector is supposed to go to the forward facing ones. They'll also be a different diameter and they need a different gasket. I've only seen those on the older generation 2.5s. All the new ones that we've been doing, they come with the skinnier one. The one that comes with my kit is for the skinnier one. Let's see, I don't have one here in front of me, but the gaskets are different. So when transferring the valve cover over, we will be changing out that gasket. This one does have the rearward facing, so we're going to end up snipping this and using our conversion little pigtail in order to connect that. This stuff I'm going to leave dangling over here for now. Let's go ahead and tighten up the front bolts, and then I need to clean that throttle body up. So while we're getting close to dropping this in, as you see, Mr. Ledford's car behind me here. As we're getting close to dropping this in, again, valve cover's going to stay off. So what I've done is, I thought about it and I said, oh, my crank installer tool works as a front plug, so that's going to stay sealed up. I'm going to go ahead and throw spark plugs in. It's just one more thing I can do before we have to put it in. And we'll worry about all the crank pulley alignment stuff, of course, after it's all in. With the spark plugs installed, I'd like to at least show you what's going on the car itself. So over here, this is Mr. Ledford's car. We pulled it out yesterday, did a quick little pressure washing because the subframe was just dirty. It wasn't covered in oil or anything, but it was dirty, so we cleaned that up. Upgrades of opportunity are being done, so we'll be doing transmission tunnel heat shielding. You can see the radiator is out. We're putting in a Koyo radiator and my fan upgrade kit. We are also, we had noticed that he had a, let's see, you can see the paint has fallen away from under here on the booster. that is indicative that the master cylinder is leaking out of the backside. So we asked him if he wanted it to be taken care of. We're going to be taking care of doing a booster and a master while it's here, and that'll flush the fluid as well. We have the front bumper off, and that's because we're doing a zero limit cold air intake, so there'll be a giant ass filter here and tube running up. One of the other things that we take care of while we have all these cars in, and we have all the AC lines out of the engine bay, so we'll be replacing every single O-ring. We like to make sure that you guys get your cars back with as many maintenances done as possible. Now, I don't have any reason to do a teardown analysis of the old engine. If you are reusing your crank pulley, then you can just blast the other one off and then stick it on here. Tell you what, let's go over how to do that. So what I have here is I have an M6. Doesn't matter how long it really is, but it starts with threads. There's no nose on this, it's just all threads. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the crank pulley on. There is an orientation. There's a hole at the bottom. That's where this bolt's gonna go through, and it's gonna thread into this hole right here. So we want to get this into position. There we go. I want to thread this in as far as I can, and that's where it's important for it to be all threads, so that way it threads as far as possible to get you, I guess, maximum grip, if you will. At this point, the crank is constrained via the pin. The pulley is constrained via the bolt. You'll have a little bit of play. That is not an issue. That little amount of play is not an issue. At this time, this is when we're going to be installing the crank bolt. So we'll install the crank bolt, and what I typically do is install the crank bolt here because I have a steel pin. The steel pin allows me to torque against it. If you don't have the steel pin, you will need to counter using your crank pulley installer tool. The crank pulley installer tool is this guy. It's a very crude cast tool, and it goes in and it just locks in like that, so you can torque against it. Much like with the cams, you have to hold one while you torque with the other. So after the 74 foot-pounds is done, I will remove the bolt here. I'll remove the pin on the side. I'll remove the cam tool, the cam locking tool, and then with it free, so to speak, I will go ahead and take care of doing my 90 degrees of yield on this. This looks like it's already been yielded before. Like the pulley has markings on it, like someone has already marked and yielded it. Yeah, there are a couple of paint marks on it. So after the yielding portion, we're going to need to get it back to that TDC position, because the chances are you're going to move the crank a bit when you do the yield, because it is something like, I don't know, 200 something foot-pounds. Maybe it was like 300. Either way, we'll get to that whenever I end up doing it, because my torque wrench reads what your final torque is when you're doing degrees. Okay, so with this lined up, I'm going to take my paint pen for illustrative purposes, and I'm going to mark the 5th tooth right here. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we've marked the pulley on the 5th tooth. You'll notice that falls between these two bolts that I placed here. This is where you would get your crank sensor, and you would center it as best as you possibly can. You want to get down to eye level, or if you're doing this in engine bay, do it with a mirror, which is what I'll be doing. And you want to make sure that the crank sensor is dead on centered with that tooth. Because if it's not, then your tune will be off by however many degrees that your sensor is off. So if you're off 2 degrees on your sensor, your whole tune is going to lose 2 degrees of timing, or it'll over advance. But that's the whole procedure for the crank pulley. Like I said, I wanted to at least demonstrate it before we drop it in. If you are removing your power steering pump, like if you're one of those people who just deconstructs everything, this is a good opportunity to install your power steering pump. Take your belt and then put it between these two spots, this pulley here and the pulley here for power steering, and verify that the cut on the side of the front cover is enough. Also the front, because if you remember I cut this as well. So this needs to be nice and smooth, this needs to be nice and smooth, as well as there needs to be enough clearance for the belt to run. Alright? So that's sort of it for the moment. Seth has a couple of more things to do. He's taking care of doing those AC O-rings. As you can see. I think you can see them. And then, oh yeah, I'll put this guy back. Take care of the valve cover gasket and transfer of the valve cover after we get, of course, the crank pulley done. So we're on hold. So as you see, we've got Mr. Ledford's car buttoned up in the front end. All this stuff is back together. We still don't have our transmission tunnel heat shielding. I should have 4 units showing up today. We'll be installing that. Strongly recommend it just because the factory stuff starts flaking off around here, and it's also kind of a hazard for anyone who gets under the car because then they're just getting rained on by fiberglass. If you are not replacing your clutch, it is important to remember that you need to put your pilot bearing in. I typically take a little wire brush and I clean out the inside because when you get these, they're out of an automatic transmission car, so there was nothing ever there, so they may have a little bit of rust inside. And that means your pilot bearing may have difficulty entering, or it'll be impossible to remove. Now, what I'm under here to show you specifically is what I do with these headers. This is a Goodwin Racing 1.8-inch header. I do this on any of the aftermarket headers, but we have brand new studs. We've removed the coating off of here. These are ceramic coated, so I've removed the coating around here, just sanded it off, and I removed the same zinc coating off of the stud. I'm going to place a couple of weld beads around here, because if you've worked on a couple NCs, you know these guys love to come out with the when you remove the nut, and that's a pain in the ass because these are really handy when you're installing a mid-pipe. Next thing is it's important on positioning of O2 sensors. So you have 2 upstream positions here, one here and one on the opposite side. It doesn't matter which one you put the upstream in, but that you put the upstream there. And for the downstream, we are going to do a couple of P-clips. P-clip them here, that way it doesn't contact the exhaust, so this can make its way to the secondary, which will be down here. If you have a factory mid-pipe, it's important to drill a hole and weld in a bung, otherwise you're not going to pass emissions if that pertains to you. Fantastic news, it's been like a week and a half and our fluid damper has shown up. Only one has come in. The other 6 are ETA'd, I guess another week or 2. Either way, got this one in, so let's go ahead and install it. You'll notice we have already assembled the car, except for the access to get the fluid damper in there. So process is very simple. We're going to open this up first. Alright, one fluid damper. So orientation wise, this goes for the fluid damper as well as on the standard crank pulley. There's one hole that needs to be at the bottom. You'll notice on the fluid damper there are 3 threaded holes. It's not those, it's this one. And it looks like they rotated this one because the orientation of these previously was with the logo at the bottom, so whatever. The non-threaded hole. And what we're going to do is we're going to take an M6 that starts with threads. It doesn't have a nose on it, it's just threads. And we're going to have to use that to thread into the front cover. Let me grab a spare cover to demonstrate. Here's my spare front cover. So when we get this on here, you'll notice there's a threaded hole right here at the bottom. When this goes on, you need to line that up. Wait, sorry. Line that up, so it's going to be like that. Once you line the holes up, you want to thread that in there. You don't need to torque it, but I always snug it down. And then we will commence with the actual torque sequence on the crank bolt. Now, I am using a steel crank pulley tool, the one that's in the side of the pin. It's steel, so I can torque against it. And what I do is I will put this all into place, and then I will just do the first 74 foot-pounds, just hit that, right? Then I will remove the pin, remove all the timing holding stuff. I will install my fluid damper installation tool, or in your case, if you have don't have the fluid damper, then you just need to use the regular crank holding tool I showed earlier with the 3 jaws, and you will torque it 90 more degrees. The fluid damper tool is actually really cool because it actually holds up against the bolt right here on the front cover, so you can just torque against that for your 90. I'm going to attempt a camera angle I haven't done before. So I'm going to take out my little holder here, or my cover. There we go. Alright, I'm going to try to get that thing to line up. Now let's get that bolt. So I'm going to go in by hand first. Okay, I was able to get it all the way down by hand. So there's a little bit of play to the fluid damper. Let me verify that bolt's bottomed out. It is. So we're going to go ahead, throw in our crank bolt. Like I said, there's just a little bit of play here. That's totally fine. Here's our crank bolt, the brand new one. I'm going to thread that guy in by hand. Got my digital torque wrench. I'm going to set this guy to 74.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a lot of things to do on the plywood or plywood or maybe hard dog.
Now with our 74, we're going to go ahead and remove the timing tools as I mentioned. So that's going to include the bolt down here that's holding the crank pulley in place. It's going to include the pin on the side of the block, which is holding the crank in place. It's going to include the bar in the back that's holding the cams in place. I'm actually going to take this opportunity to go ahead and align the crank sensor. I left it loose in here. That way I could line it up. And since we're sitting here at the correct position to line it up, I'm going to grab my mirror and do that. Alright, our 3 timing component tools are removed, those 3 guys. So now the crank is actually, it is reasonably torqued down to a point that if you wanted to check your timing, now is the time before you yield that crank bolt. You can rotate this engine over 360 degrees, sorry, 720 degrees, because you have to rotate it twice, and then you can try to reinsert all of your timing tools. If you are going to do that, maybe don't put your spark plugs in yet. Okay, so I do need to put the plug in the side of the motor, and then I'm going to put in the fluid damper tool, and then we'll torque that. Here we have our plug. So we're going to reach in here and install it. So if you are, can I see? So if you are installing a fluid damper, you will need a Company 23 fluid damper installation tool. And then on my website, I offer a special 3D printed part that I made that helps it fit easily on here, as well as the correct bolts. The ones that come with the fluid damper tool are actually intended for a Subaru fluid damper. It's a different thread pitch. So this won't fit in here right now. I have to rotate the crank just a little bit in order to be able to get it in there. But then I'm going to use my tool to, to go in there and throw the bolts in. Now, I dislike doing this in car, but we don't really have an option here. Okay, so, all right, and then the last bolt. I really hope you guys can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so as I mentioned, this fluid damper tool is going to hit right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the crank until it is just at a stop all the way. Yeah, that's not moving. So now we're going to set our torque wrench. So again, I got the fancy Snap-on digital here, so we're going to set this for 90 degrees. So we got it set for 90. I'm going to stick this guy in here, and then it's going to be just pulling against it here. Almost there. There we go. 90. And that was almost 240 foot-pounds. That's just for reference. That's quite a bit of torque. Okay. We can now remove the fluid damper tool. We can continue reinstallation of the valve cover, all of the engine-based stuff. Next we have our valve cover. So as we've identified, we have the smaller of the VVT units. So we're going to knock that guy out, just sit this on the ground and then hit it with a hammer. It'll pop out of the bottom. There we go. At this point, I'm going to smooth around the edge here with just some light sandpaper because it makes it easier for the new seal to go in. I'm going to go and take care of that real quick. Back to normal overhead perspective. So, got my little sanding disc on here. Like I said, I'm just going to cut the sharp edge down. Okay, new gasket on the valve cover. I'm going to put that aside. I do need to clean off, where's my blade? There it is. So whenever we put on the front cover, usually a little bit of RTV sticks up right here. That's fine, we're just going to chop that off. The reason for that is we're about to put another little dab of RTV in that spot. So I got my little RTV tube here. Alright, I'm going to pause here because my lunch just arrived. I'm going to go eat lunch and then we'll tighten this valve cover down. If you purchased my 2.5 swap kit, then you will have your seal installer. This is the time when you take it out of the package and you're going to stick that in there. It's not the tightest to fit, but it lines up here and this will set you for proper depth. So well, that concludes the whole assembly portion of this video. We're going to go ahead and fast forward through the reassembly of the rest of the stuff that's not pertinent to this video and then fire it up. Everything back together for the most part. I've got the belt in, all of the surrounding structures and the battery, and we have this nice big open space here because of the zero limit 3-inch cold air intake. He didn't want my battery relocation kit, but you can imagine this amount of space over here, allowing even more flow for the fan. Okay, we need to swap out this connector since we do have the smaller VVT unit. In my kit comes the Motorcraft pigtails. So what we're going to do is we're going to snip this, snip that, and then connect them together. So just for clarity here, it does not matter the polarity of these two wires when you hook them up, so just hook them up. It is just a completed circuit type thing, so as long as you complete the circuit, it's good. So we've snapped that on there, done that. I'm gonna connect it. We need to send off for our tune, and we're effectively done. Just forwarding along, I got the car, well, we got a tune for it, we loaded the tune. We've already vacuum filled the coolant system. It is absolutely paramount that you vacuum fill the coolant system. It's even better to do it with the nose up because the coolant tank is in the front and the highest point of the coolant system is actually those tubes running over the top of the back of the engine bay, which is higher, which is a bad idea. So either way, you'll notice I have it on my lift here with just the front two arms. The front two arms are in the center. We're not trying to cantilever this thing. We got this thing lifted up in the front, and we're gonna sit here and we're gonna hold like 3,000-ish RPM. We're gonna watch the coolant level go up and then down. I'm gonna add a little more into the funnel. I have another video on how to do this whole process. But you'll hear it runs, it sounds great. If you don't have an aftermarket intake, you can actually fire it up and it will run okay, even if you have cams. For this one, we couldn't because the aftermarket intake is significantly larger, so the engine had no idea what to do. It was able to fire up, but then it would try to die, right? Either way, so this actually concludes our video. Thank you, Mr. Ledford, for sending us your car. Say thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
And if you guys have any questions, need any parts, let us know.